Well, it's break time. The Flames have made the Four Nations break, and they did so in interesting fashion here. Not exactly the strong performances we've been known to see from the Calgary Flames. Welcome inside another episode of the Red Mile Rundown. Excited to be back with you guys today to talk another week of Flames hockey alongside myself, John Eastope. As always, is my co-host, Robert Munich. How we doing, Robert?
I'm doing pretty good. That last week of Flames hockey it almost like put a dent into things this season. It left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth heading into the Four Nations break. We'll say that for sure.
Absolutely. And we're going to get into that in just a sec here. But before we get there, I wanted to thank everyone again for the downloads, the listens, and all of the sharing of the podcast. We're consistently having top 5 weeks among our numbers and analytics. And so we greatly appreciate it. Of course, we are everywhere you get your podcast. We do ask, though, please leave us those 5-star ratings and reviews. Help us grow the show here, and we can continue to give you guys excellent podcast. So we appreciate each and every one of you. Robert mentions there, it was a very tough week around the Flames. If you're looking for results, if you look just at the scores, you got to be very disappointed in what you actually saw. It was a slog of a week, in my opinion, for the Flames. It starts in goal for me. It starts with Dustin Wolf when you see what this team is when he just has an average week. Robert, where are you at with this team, what you saw this week with Dustin Wolf, with the play of the team here? We always have these conversations about, are the Flames a playoff team? Has your opinion here changed on this team given this week? Because they went up against a couple of offensive buzzsaws in the Maple Leafs and the Avalanche, and then they let a very winnable game against the Kraken slip away. What do you make of the week, and where are you at here with this group?
You know, my opinion pretty consistently all season has been that this is not a playoff team unless Dustin Wolf plays at a Calder Trophy and Vezina Trophy level. And yeah, my opinion still hasn't changed. And I think what we saw last week is this is what happens when Dustin Wolf isn't playing at an elite level. And it's unfair and it's unrealistic for Flames fans and Flames observers to expect Dustin Wolf to play at that level throughout the entirety of a season as a 23-year-old rookie. So against the Maple Leafs, against the Avalanche, I mean, we saw him not be on his game. He wasn't. Those are probably 2 of his worst starts of the entire season. And because the Flames can't score goals, they're pretty much automatic losses. If Dustin Wolf doesn't play incredibly well, this team loses hockey games. And even on Saturday, I thought Wolf, particularly in the first 2 periods, was incredible. Like, if it wasn't for Dustin Wolf, Seattle could have ran away with that game. Like, he made so many good saves. Like, he made a save. There's like a 5-on-2 when Mackenzie Weegar's skate blade broke. Made an incredible save. And then he had the diving glove save going across the crease on the 5-on-3 and a breakaway save and 2-on-1 saves. It was just like huge save, like over and over and over and over again. And the Flames gave him no offensive support. They gave him no help. And, you know, he ends up letting in a couple weaker goals to tie the game against Seattle. But once again, the Calgary Flames can't score goals and they can't give him the support he needs. And it's very frustrating. I mean, at this point of the season, this is probably the most frustrated and down I've been on the Calgary Flames all season. That's kind of how I'm feeling right now. How about yourself? How do you feel after that week that was for the Calgary Flames?
For me, it goes back more than just this last week. Just over a week ago, they were in Seattle playing that same Kraken team. And I'm going to use the word escape with a win in that game because of Dustin Wolf and because of their 5-on-3. And they had the 5-on-3 again this week, and that's when they scored their goals. You take away those 5-on-3 goals, this team was scoring 0 goals, 1 goal. Like, you're not winning hockey games that week. And so it's very hard for me to find positives amongst this Flames team this past week, given the results we saw. They had leads in all of these games and let them slip away. They weren't able to, off the rush, they weren't able to be defensively sound in their structure. And Dustin Wolf, we praised this kid last week. We even had an entire segment on just how much we glossed over the play of Dustin Wolf. But this past week, he was beaten in ways we haven't seen yet. That he was beaten clean. Given the caliber of shooters, guys like William Nylander and Nathan McKinnon, you're not always going to stop those guys. But we have never seen Dustin Wolf get beat clean as often as we saw this past week. Even Seattle went right through him. So I'm right there with you here. We talked multiple episodes here about, is this a playoff team? Does this team have what it takes to make the playoffs? And we both have been very consistent in that Dustin Wolf has to be Dustin Wolf at the highest levels. And what happens when this falls off a little bit? We just saw what happens when he is average. This team isn't good enough. And I'm not saying that these players aren't good. We have some very good players. I think Morgan Frost has been fairly good for the Flames. Mackenzie Weegar's been really good for the Flames. You can list a number of different guys that have had really good weeks, really good seasons for this team. But as a group, they're just not getting inside enough. They're not producing enough. They're not creating enough offensively. And then defensively, you're just finding a lot of defensive struggles for some reason. And I'm not just going to blame the defensemen on that. You watch the lack of a back check from certain guys. Your veterans, Nazem Kadri, isn't doing the job that he's supposed to be doing a lot of times when he's on the back check. Very 50-50 play from a lot of these guys. And when you're not pulling the wagon and producing and just relying on a rookie goaltender, you're not going to go far. So I'm with you, Robert. It's hard to find a positive. It's hard to feel good about this group after the week we just watched. They've got 27 games left here, and they're 3 points back at Vancouver with same number of games played for that final wild card spot. Now you're chasing it. Not 2 weeks ago, you were 3 points up on Vancouver, and you had the pole position. You had the opportunity here to just match what Vancouver does, and you're in the playoffs. Well, now you've got to chase a team down, and you've also got to hold off a couple of teams behind you for that wild card. And that's a hard spot to be in for a team that doesn't produce, for a team that has a hard time finding a finish, and for a team that's relying on a rookie goaltender. That's a lot of pressure. And we just went through probably on quote unquote the easiest part of their schedule if you go based on who they're playing. Strength of the schedule down the stretch here is it's going to get a lot tougher for the Flames. They got a big road trip coming up out of the break. They've got a lot of hard teams. They've got playoff teams in front of them here to play. And so we're going to see how they're tested mentally here down the stretch over the next 27 games, Robert. Does last week, though, change your perspective on this team, Robert? I know we both are very much agreeant on whether this is a playoff team with or without Dustin Wolf, but your overall perspective of the team, how has that shifted over this last week to 2 weeks here of watching this team?
Honestly, I mean, it really hasn't. I mean, when you take a look at it, they've basically played the same style of hockey that they have for the whole season. And there's a couple breakdowns in there, but I think that's going to happen. But once again, it was Dustin Wolf wasn't up to a Vezina Trophy caliber goalie over the week, and they ended up losing games. And I think it's as simple as that. And like when I take a look at this Flames team, like this is not a good team. Like where they are in the standings is not an indication of actually how good they are as a club. Like in my opinion, this team should be down at the bottom of the standings with the Blackhawks, Predators, Sabres, Kraken. Like that's the caliber of team they are. Like if you just take a look outside of Dustin Wolf, let's take just a quick glimpse at this team here. So since October 14th, they're dead last in goals, and they're dead last in 5-on-5 goals. Their penalty kill is 28th. They have the lowest point leader of any team in the NHL. So in terms of a guy who's leading your team in scoring, he has the least amount of points compared to everybody else who's leading their team in scoring, and that's Jonathan Huberdeau right now. There's zero offense coming from the blue line. You get a little bit coming from Weegar, but outside of that, the blue line is a black hole offensively. Depth scoring is an issue. They barely generate high danger chances. Last I checked, they were 26 in the NHL at 5-on-5 and generating dangerous chances. And man, like I look at this team and just like everything is just mediocre or below average. And Dustin Wolf once again is just completely keeping them in it. Like, he's been in net for 19 of their 26 wins. He has one more loss on his record than Dan Vladar, despite playing in 11 more games. Like, that's crazy. And he's 6th in the NHL in high danger save percentage, 9th in the NHL in goals saved above expected, 13th in the NHL in save percentage. He's doing this as a 23-year-old rookie with a mediocre, below average team in front of him. Like, it's crazy. And I'm really starting to get a little bit down on this team. I'm really starting to get a little bit down on this season. Like I'll ask you, like, the more I've been thinking about it lately, the more I'm thinking, like, this is almost becoming just a complete lost season. Like, I could see us 10 years from now looking back on the 2024-2025 season and saying that season, like what was the point of that season? What did the Flames accomplish that season? That's kind of where I'm getting right now with this year. It just feels like a lost year because I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. They're in jeopardy of losing their first round pick, which could be 11th, 12th, 13th overall. And they're not a very fun, exciting team either. Like I'll throw it to you. Like, do you think this is kind of becoming a bit of a lost season for the Calgary Flames, or am I being a little too dramatic here?
No, I definitely can get that opinion here. This Flames team this season is exactly what you didn't want the Flames to be. This is 100% the season I feared the most from the Flames, and I'll explain that here. If you're going to be a playoff team and make the playoffs, I'm all for that. I'm all for it. Get in the wild card, take a swing at one of the big dogs, and maybe once in a while a team gets lucky doing that. We've seen it more than once. Hell, the Flames did it back in 2004. So we've seen the Kings win a cup doing that. So get in, fine, if that's what you want to be. Or be a team that realizes that they're not good enough, move on from a couple of pieces, recoup some assets, and continually build this team through the draft. That is my biggest thing about this Flames team is I've always been a guy who's maintained you don't need to be first overall and pick first overall for 3 years in a row to get players, but you do need to pick through the draft and develop these players to build your roster. So if you're not going to be a playoff team and in that playoff mix, drop yourself down, get a good draft pick, and continue to develop this group so you can be a playoff team. What you didn't want to see is what we're seeing right now. And I'm not saying that shame on you, Dustin Wolf. Awesome for Dustin Wolf to go out there and be one of the best goaltenders in the league, rookie of the year caliber candidate. But you've got to know what you are as a team and as a franchise. And what you didn't want to see is exactly this. They're a few points out of a playoff spot. They're a few points away from being a top 10 pick in the draft, depending on how the lottery shakes out, of course. And you're right in the mushy of the mushy middle. You're not good enough. You're not bad enough, but you don't know what you actually are. And unfortunately, we know what this ownership group loves to do in Calgary and chase the little bit of success that they see rather than do the smart thing. And I'm not saying tank the rest of the season. What I'm saying is realize what you actually are, realize what these numbers are telling you, because you listed them off there, Robert. You listed they're 20 something in this, they're 20 something in that, they're 30th in this, they're 32nd in this. You didn't say the word top 10 or top 15 in any category, and the only one I could find in that category besides Dustin Wolf's numbers were their top 10 in shots per game. That's the only category I found that they were the top 15 of. You see a lot of mid-20s, and so they got to realize what the numbers are telling them. They're telling them this is a group that they can work hard, but they don't have the skill to get over what you need them to get over to be a playoff team, a no-doubt playoff team. You're 3 points back from a team that has figured it out. Demko's playing better if he's not injured long-term here. They're getting good goaltending from Lankinen. They're getting guys playing at a higher level. Patterson has come around for them. Hedl has been a really good addition for them in that trade. You got good defensive depth on the back end now, bringing in the other Patterson. The Canucks have figured it out a little bit here. And another thing we don't talk about, I think, with the Flames here is when they get long layovers and long breaks over the past decade, they come back and they are flat. And that's what scares me about what we're going to see after this Four Nations break. This break was needed for a lot of guys. Backlund looked injured and gassed. Guys like Mackenzie Weegar and Rasmus Anderson are playing 25 minutes a night. They needed the break as well. Well, I guess Rasmus is at the Four Nations, but guys like Weegar are going to need this break. But what are we going to see coming out of this break? Are they going to be able to pick right back up and be that hardworking team and somehow magically find some offense? Potentially could happen, but we're probably looking at what we saw this last week as the new norm for this Flames group. I don't see them finding a scoring touch anywhere, Robert. I just really don't. And we don't want to be Debbie Downers on the podcast, but you want to be truthful in what your opinions are and what you are. So this Flames team this year is doing 100% what you didn't want them to do, and that is be the mushiest of the mushy middle.
Yeah, I mean, what you said right there was really smart, and the one thing I really like there is you were talking about, like, understand what you are. Like, if you're Craig Conroy and Don Maloney, how do you not realize that you are just not a good hockey team? How do you think to yourself, like, oh, like, I'm really liking what I'm seeing right now. Like, we're gonna make the playoffs and we could do some damage. All you're watching is a goalie win you games. When it comes to every other facet of your game, it's below average for the most part. I mean, like you said, there's a odd category, like shots there in the top 10, power play there in the top 15. Outside of that, they don't really do a whole heck of a lot. And the thing that bothers me is Craig Conroy is just steadfast on, we have to be competitive. We have to be competitive. So that means that we're not going to trade a Rasmus Anderson. We're not going to trade a Nazem Kadri. We're not going to trade a Blake Coleman. We're not doing any of that. We're actually going to try and improve our roster this season. Like, this Farabee Frost trade, like, I get that it's for the short term and the long term, but at the same time, it actually makes the Flames even more mediocre than they are, because they're adding two kind of third, second line players at best, just to kind of keep them in that mix this season. I think what Conroy and Maloney need to realize is, once again, this is just not a very good hockey team, and lean into it. Lean into it. Trade those guys. Bring in value. Bring in draft picks. Bring in young players. If you take, like, a Rasmus Anderson and a Nazem Kadri away from this team, there's no doubt in my mind that they'll finish in the bottom 10. No doubt in my mind, even if Dustin Wolf continues to play well. Those are the types of moves that they need to be making. This whole let's be competitive in a playoff spot, even though we're in the first year of a rebuild thing, it just doesn't work. And it just feels like they're a directionless team. It feels like they're going nowhere quickly. And I'm really worried, just looking at the roster right now, I'm really worried that this team is going to turn into a Seattle or a St. Louis or a New York Islanders, where these teams, they have a lot of good players. Their rosters are littered with good players. There's no great players. And if you take a look at, like, the Flames cap situation, there's a lot of guys making in that $5 to $10 million range, guys who are just mediocre players. You know what I mean? Like you take a look at like Nazem Kadri, he's on pace for less than 60 points. Huberdeau, this is the first time in his time in Calgary he's on pace for over 60, and it's 61 points. Like, it's still not great. Coleman makes $5 million and he's not providing as much as you'd hope this season. Sharon Govich, Farabee, like, to me, and then you're gonna get if it all goes to plan for Craig Conroy, they're gonna end up signing Rasmus Anderson to a gigantic contract. It just feels like this team is just going to be littered with, like, average to slightly above average players, but they're missing that elite talent, and that's where the draft comes in, and that's where making as many picks in the draft as you can comes into the table. It just feels like this team is on a collision course with mediocrity for a long time, and that worries me a little bit. It worries me for just kind of like the long-term health of the franchise, for the fan base. Like, this fan base, outside of a couple seasons in the last, since 1995, there's been nothing to cheer for. Like, it sucks. And it just feels like we're heading down the same direction that this franchise has been heading down since 1995 for 30 goddamn years. And it just sucks. All I want is for this team just to be really good, have a core group of players of 4 or 5 guys who are elite to high-end players, and it just, with where they're going to be picking in the draft and the way they're shaping their roster right now, it just doesn't feel like they're going to achieve that goal, and it just feels like they're going to be mediocre for a long time. Once again, I don't mean to be like a Debbie Downer, but at the same time, like you said, we just want to call it as it is. We just want to talk about the team truthfully and call it how we see it, and not put on rose-colored glasses. And I don't know, man. It's just, this season in general has been a little concerning. The future feels a little concerning. The only thing to really be truly excited about is you have Dustin Wolf. Zane Parekh hopefully will become a top pair defenseman. We'll see if that ends up happening or not. But like outside of that, there's not like a whole heck of a lot to be like super, super excited for when it comes to this team and its long-term future.
Yeah. Well, for me as well, it's they're right there. The path is literally right there. They're 4 or 5 points away from a top 10 pick. They've got the draft capital to do it. They've got the assets they can move to make this happen. It's right there. And all they need to do is have a little bit of honest assessment in what they're doing every single day. I don't mind the thing of let's try to be competitive. You can play a competitive brand of hockey and put out an exciting style of hockey while you play, while you're rebuilding. We've talked about that before, but make your plan of building your team through the draft. Like make it and then make it happen because you're right there. It's right there for you. And you just got to make that decision. This franchise continually. If you mentioned 95, you go back further than that. You can go after 1990, and it's just stop chasing the smallest bit of success. You saw it after 04. We saw it after 2015. Like just the smallest minute success that they have. You don't need to always chase it. Growth is not linear in the National Hockey League in sports. Just isn't. You have to actively go out there and continually develop yourself, develop your team, develop your plan, and keep your goals in mind. If your goal is to be a mediocre, almost playoff team, goal accomplished. If your goal is to be a playoff team perennial, you're far off of that. If your goal is to be a Stanley Cup contender, well, start over because you're not anywhere close to that either. Excuse me.
Yeah, it feels like we're in for another decade of make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, make the playoffs, miss the playoffs, and lose in the first round. That's what it feels like we're on a crash collision with right now.
Early this season, everyone was talking about how close the vibes were to that 14-15 season because of all the comeback wins. Well, I agree with that assessment that it still feels like 14-15 because they could luck out here over the final 27 games, get that last wild card spot, and there's playoff success again, right? It's right there for you, and it feels like you're going to chase it again. It's not hard to stick to your guns. And I know people are like, well, you have to reward players for playing well and make trades and bring people. That's hogwash. That just means your message in your room isn't being delivered properly. Tell this group that you believe in them, that you believe in the growth of the young players. You believe in the growth of a Connor Zary and a Matt Coronado to lead this team down the road, that you believe in bringing in Frost to help be the next part of this core, that you believe in these guys, that Kevin Bahl is going to be your guy on the back end. You don't always need to make a trade to make a trade. And if you're just trading all the time, well, we don't see that work. We don't see it work when building a team for sustainability and long term. So the Flames for me right now, be honest in what you are. Look at they have more numbers than we have. They see more than we see on our social media sites or NHL.com. They have way more information than we do, but their information cannot be telling them that they're this no doubt top 10 team in the National Hockey League. There's just no way. Be honest. This is Dustin Wolf pulling along a half-dead corpse as far as he can pull them. And when he is not elite, if he is not elite and he plays only average hockey like we saw this last week, we see how rough it looks because none of those 3 games were any fun to watch last week if you're looking for results from the Calgary Flames. And that's just how I see it. And it's unfortunate. Again, not trying to be negative, just trying to see how I see it. I want this team to be successful, and you can see the path. It's right there, just hoping the Flames take it.
Yeah, I mean, like you take a look at some of their younger players, like Connor Zary, I'd say he probably maxes out as like a second-line center, which is great, but it means like he's a good player. Morgan Frost feels like he maxes out as a middle six center, which is awesome. Still not elite. Matt Coronado feels like he could probably be score 30 goals a few times in his career, top 6 winger.
Mm-hmm.
Still not that elite core member you need. Sharon Govich is mediocre. Kevin Bahl is decent top 4 defenseman, looks like. Pretty much all you have right now is you have Dustin Wolf. That's your elite guy. That's the guy you have to build around. Everything else around him is just mediocre. And it's just frustrating to watch that. It's just frustrating to hear Conroy think that, he can push this team into the playoffs. It really does kind of feel like 2014-15, because you had that year was essentially led by Johnny Gaudreau. He was the driving force of that hockey team, him alongside Mark Giordano, I would argue. And this year it's kind of similar, where you have a smaller rookie sort of carrying your team into a playoff conversation, this time being Dustin Wolf. So your comparison to 14-15 to 24-25 is very interesting, and I think it's pretty bang on.
Those players you listed off, those young players, that's a good foundational start, right? But now you need to supplement that foundational start with your elite talents, with your role
they're good support players, right?
Yeah, it's exactly how you start building a franchise. You've got your goaltender, you got some good support players. Now go find your elite talent. And the only way to do it, and I'm going to hammer ahead on this, is through the draft. Yes, we saw Mikko Rantanen get traded, but he's a decade into his NHL career. Is that what you want for your elite talent, is these guys that are a decade or 12 years into an NHL career? Or do you want to build around some of these guys, draft some of these guys? If you draft a guy like a Michael Misa in this draft, that team's going to be very happy. That is a player who potentially can be a top-line center and lead your team for years. How do you think the Ducks got Getzlaf and Perry? The Oilers get McDavid and Draisaitl. You get Crosby and Malkin. You draft and develop your elite guys. As important as these foundational pieces are, you still need your elite guys. And I don't mean to disrespect Zary and Frost, because anyone who follows me on social media knows how much I love those guys. Those are your support guys. Those are your second and third line center guys. Those are the guys that are going to be out there to set up the shift for your elite guy coming out. That's what you need here. It's what you need now is the elite talent. It's a good foundation, but you just can't rely on Dustin Wolf every single night here, because it's just not a recipe for success. There's not a team out there right now that has won a cup in the last 2 decades that has done so solely based because their goaltender drugged them start to finish year after year after year after year. You need your elite guys, and you need offense, obviously. Captain Obvious there. You need offense to win hockey games. The Flames don't have that.
Yeah, and basically what the Calgary Flames are relying on is being the most savvy and basically the best drafting team in the NHL, because when you're not picking high in the draft, you need to snipe out elite talent in the mid first round or beyond the first round. So they're pretty much banking on this idea that their scouting staff is going to be the best in the entire NHL. And what we've seen over the course of the last 30 years of this franchise is that the drafting has been mediocre, kind of like everything else with this franchise. I know they had a really good draft on paper last year, which is fantastic. It looks like they drafted for a lot of skill and a lot of upside, but they're going to have to continue to do that year after year after year after year. And I just don't know if that's realistic. Like to be the best drafting team in the NHL over the course of the next 3 or 4 seasons is asking a lot of your scouting staff. And I don't think any other team in the NHL can hang their hat on having that. Like it just doesn't seem like a recipe for long-term success. So we should probably move on to a next topic, but I enjoy kind of these big picture discussions, and I have a feeling a lot of Flames fans are feeling the same way about this season that you and I do.
Yeah, and real quick here before we move on here, your draft mentions there, that's spot on. It's not often you're going to find a Kucherov or a Zetterberg. Like you look at the overall picture of drafting, that's a very rare thing to do. You find your elite talents at the top of the draft here. We talked about Zary and Bahl. What does this team look like when those two guys are back? Because we see a lot of people on social media talk about, hey, just wait till Zary's back. Zary and Frost together are going to be so good. I've been one of those guys. Or how much does this team miss a Kevin Bahl, which they do. But how much does this just change your opinion of the team and how you see the lineup with these two guys when and if they come back here?
Yeah, there's that, and then there's also Michael Backlund resting for the next 2 weeks. If they can get Michael Backlund back to being the normal captain,
yes,
not the guy he's been the last couple weeks. Who, I mean, everybody in the Flames media has said that he's playing through an injury. So if you can get him healthy,
And why is he
with Zary
playing?
back, it's honestly a really good question, because you can make an argument that he was actually hurting the Flames. I thought he was good on Saturday against
100%
Seattle,
he
but
was.
against Colorado and Toronto, he was not good. Like, the Colorado game was probably the worst game I've seen him play in a long time. So if you can get him back, get Zary in there, you're adding a 50-point player to the lineup. You get Kevin Bahl back in. You're adding a top 4 defenseman. I still think they're just kind of mediocre, like we've been saying all episode. And I think those guys will help them remain in the mix, and I think they'll be right there for a wild card spot. But in the end, I do think Vancouver ends up pulling away with it. I've been saying it all year. I do expect Dustin Wolf to take a step back at some point. We saw it a little bit last week, but just he's playing so much hockey. He's playing at an elite level. Like, just to expect him to continue to do this, like I've said a lot, is I think it's unrealistic. So if he does end up taking a step back, how are the Flames going to end up winning games? Well, they're going to have to score more goals. They're going to have to start being a lot better on the penalty kill. They're going to have to start playing a lot better defensively. And I just don't know if I see those things happening. So obviously it'll be a nice boost to have those guys back in the lineup, but I still don't know if it's quite enough to get them over the hump and into that second wild card spot.
The defense scares me. And I think despite getting Bahl back and despite getting Zary back, I don't think that boasts the Flames as much as some people might think. I think the offense might look a little crisper with Connor Zary, making people slot a little bit better. But you look at that defense, and even with Kevin Bahl before he was injured, we talked about how struggled that pairing with Anderson looked at times and how much Anderson has struggled at times this year. Mackenzie Weegar is consistently trying to fix his defensive partner, whether it's Hanley or Bean or Miromanov or whoever he's been paired with. And I just don't think that the Flames' defensive and defensive structure are going to be good enough to help the Flames overcome the shortcomings of this roster. Miromanov is almost unplayable for me at times. He was very gross last week for me. Barry looked unplayable versus the Toronto Maple Leafs last week. We've seen Bean take a step back here. Bahl has taken a small step back, although he's still been fairly good for the Flames overall. You're relying on Mackenzie Weegar here to lift an entire group of 6-7 guys on his back and play out of his mind to pull this group along. I'm a little bit glad he didn't get picked for the Four Nations because he's going to need his rest. He's been playing 25 minutes a night for this Flames group and doing everything he can to pull the Flames along here. For me, outside of Dustin Wolf, he might have been this team's MVP right now. So for me, getting these two guys back will be very good for them, for their development. But overall, I don't think it's going to affect where the Flames will end at the end of the season at all, to be honest here, because there's just so much on this Flames roster that is not pulling along right now, led by this defensive group I just went through, that it's just a lot to overcome. And as you mentioned, Dustin Wolf will come down to earth. We saw it. It's just not a pretty equation if you look at it that way. It's not a pretty outlook for the Flames here, especially as we mentioned, the Canucks figuring things out. Don't look in the rearview mirror either, because Utah has been playing very good hockey as of late. They got a nice result against the best team in the league before the Four Nations break here. And they're not the only ones either. St. Louis isn't that far behind, and Anaheim, don't look now, are only 6 points back. So you've got teams right there trying to fight to get over top of you to get to Vancouver, and you got Vancouver figuring it out. As much as I love Connor Zary, he's not going to save this season. He's not going to save this offense. He's not going to come in here and just willfully take this team on his back like a Crosby would into the playoffs. If he does, give the guy the Hart Trophy, because that's an incredible effort we'll see down the stretch over 27 games. I just don't see it, man. And I hate talking about it that way anyways.
I want to ask just a quick question.
Yep.
Do you think Connor Zary will be the same player when he returns to the lineup? And what I mean by that is like I'm almost wondering, will this injury and will this play almost kind of scare him a little bit? Like we saw last season, Jacob Pelche, when he returned to the lineup from his shoulder injury, he was not the same player. Mainly because it looked like he was tentative. It looked like he didn't want to engage in battles. He didn't want to go to the hard areas. I'm almost wondering, like, are we going to see something similar from Zary? Because a big part of his game is rushing the puck up the ice, taking the puck to the middle, going hard to the net. Do you think there might be an element of his game where he kind of takes a step back and goes, like, because of that hit, because of the injury he suffered, do you think there might be some trepidation to his game when he returns to the lineup?
My answer is no. It might be like a game or two before we see that from him. But my reason for saying no is if you go back and watch Connor Zary since he got into the Western Hockey League, and being a season ticket holder in the Western Hockey League, I've seen a ton of Connor Zary. He's always been a pit bull. No matter what the contact, no matter what the consequence was, no matter what the situation was, he's always just bounced right back, and the next shift he goes right back at it. And he's done nothing over his NHL career and AHL career to suggest anything different than what we've seen. Was just him bouncing back and being that pitbull again. So I fully expect to see pitbull Connor Zary. It might take him a game or two or a nice really big hit along the boards for him to get comfortable being hit again. But I think we'll see him bounce back. I really do. I think his mindset doesn't allow for anything different. I think Jacob Pelche, when he got injured, he's got a little bit of a softer play to his game. He's not like that, in my opinion. Where Connor Zary, he is just a pit bull. He'll come at you. He'll keep going until there's no fight left to fight. And so for me, the answer is no. What about yourself?
I'm not totally sure. I mean, I don't know the player as well as you do. You've obviously watched him a lot longer than I have. I really hope it doesn't impact his game because, man, like when he dangles and when he takes the puck to the net, and when he carries the puck with speed, it's like probably like the most entertaining aspect of watching Flames hockey this season. So if he were to kind of slow down that aspect of his game, that would really be too bad. But I'm really hoping that he can come back and be that kind of 50-point player, be that creative guy, and really spark this team. Like I think they've missed him a lot. And I know a lot of people keep saying that, how desperately the Flames miss Kevin Bahl, and they have, don't get me wrong. But there's not a lot of people saying how much this team has missed Connor Zary. And I think it's been big from a playmaking perspective. Like there's a lot of guys on this team that are not great playmakers. Like you take a look at their point projections. There's only 3 players on the Flames roster that are on pace for more than 30 assists. And that's Huberdeau at 30, Kadri at 31, and Weegar at 37. The rest of the team, they're all below 30 assists in terms of an 82-game point projection. So to have a guy like Zary come back in the lineup and be a playmaker and spark offense a little bit, I think it's going to be huge for this team.
The biggest thing for me when Zary comes back here, and I'll get your opinion on this as well, Robert, is I think the biggest factor when Zary is back here for the Flames will be where he slots in this lineup and how he's going to allow others to slot into this lineup. Now it brings up some options for this Flames group. Does he go back to center? Does he play on the wing? Does he play with Frost? Does he go back and play with Nazem Kadri on the top line? What would you do with Connor Zary when he comes back here? Because I'm very fascinated. Very fascinated to see where they line up here and how you would do your lines. Because personally, I'd love to see Frost play with the 2 new guys, both Farabee and Frost with Zary on a line. I just wonder how that would look and how well that would play. That would mean probably Sheridan Govich or Coronado on the top line, and I'm okay with that. Where would you slot Connor Zary and how he would look into this lineup?
Yeah, it's a good question. Because I mean, I thought Zary was playing really well at center, but I'll throw this idea out at you. Let's see what you think of this. So Zary, I thought he was playing really well at center ice when he exited the lineup. Could you see a world where they potentially put Kadri, Frost, Zary, Backlund down the middle? Because we've known all season that Kevin Rooney has been an absolute disaster. All of a sudden, if you put those 4 guys down the middle and kind of divvy out ice time evenly, I mean, you could have a pretty deep center group there. Do you think that makes any sense? It probably won't happen, but humor me here.
4th line Backlund? I actually don't mind that.
And it's not like a traditional 4th line. It would be like Backlund would probably play 3rd line minutes, but you have 4 centers deep down your lineup there, and it moves Kevin Rooney to the press box. I mean, could you imagine an upgrade like Michael Backlund to Kevin Rooney? I mean, that is just a huge upgrade for the Calgary Flames. It might be something they have to consider here moving forward.
I'll tell you this, that works on NHL 24 because I've done it. So
that does feel like a video game move.
It does, but that's the kind of thing and options that I'm talking about when it comes to the Flames. There's options here for this group. You move Backlund down to that fourth line, say with Lomberg and Pospisil or whoever it is. That can be a group that just goes out there, provides you with energy. You're still going to get your power play and penalty killing time for Michael Backlund. You take a little bit of 5-on-5 responsibility off of him because we've seen both Zary and Frost be responsible 5-on-5 for this team. We know what Nazem Kadri brings in a top line role, and then it allows yourself some freedom for some of these wingers, and you can move other guys around. I actually don't mind that idea one bit. The problem is who do you put on whose wing? And that's something that's easily figured out as you play games here. Is it Farabee and Frost becomes a pairing? Coleman and Zary become a pairing. You got Kadri, Huberdeau, and then you fill in your other wingers. Very interesting idea, Robert. I love it. NHL 25 loves it. We'll see. I don't think the Flames go there, but interesting idea.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I mean, Zary's probably going to end up on the wing. I don't really know where I'd want him. When I was doing prep for the pod, I had him on the wing with like Frost and Coronado. But I like your idea of keeping Frost and Farabee together, just because I think they played together in the past. They're best friends. There could be some chemistry there. So maybe you go like Zary, Frost, Farabee, Huberdeau, Kadri, Coronado, Coleman, Backlund, Sharangovich, and then a fourth line of Lomberg, Pospisil, Hunt, something along the lines of that. Do you like Coronado with Huberdeau and Kadri? What do you think of that fit?
Well, we need to see it more before really you can make a judgment on it, because you can see it there. You can see how it would work, but we just haven't seen it enough. And when the Flames are chasing games last week, it was hard to get a read on those groups here. I don't know how it works, but if you're not going to put Coronado there, who's it going to be? It's going to be Sharangovich or Connor Zary. Well, what's the best fit of the three? We saw them go back to Pospisil up there with those two guys for a bit as well, which I don't like as a fit. So I'd like to see Coronado stay there for a bit. What are we going to see over the course of, say, 6, 7, 8, 9 games? What can you see over a stretch of games from that trio to say to put them together? Because if it doesn't work, you have other options. But man, if Huberdeau and Coronado can click, look out. That could be something that could be very magical for the Flames for a couple of years here. But I need to see it more before I really can make a judgment on it. What about yourself?
I don't mind it. I think the thing that comes to mind for me is that Nazem Kadri is the type of player who wants the puck on his stick, and he loves to make plays, aka try to dangle people and get shots on goal. I don't see Kadri as a great distributor right now. And the same thing kind of goes for Huberdeau. Like, Huberdeau's turned into more of a goal scorer than a passer. And I find with Coronado, he needs to play with guys that are going to get him the puck and put him in positions to shoot. And it just feels like Kadri and Huberdeau, although they lead the team among forwards and assists this year, I just don't know if their style of play is conducive for a guy like Matt Coronado, who, like I said, who needs people to get him the puck. Just doesn't feel like Kadri's going to, like, if Kadri's going to make a play, he has the opportunity to take a shot or make a pass to Matt Coronado. What's he going to do? Well, Kadri's a shoot first kind of guy. Like, I could see him passing up on those opportunities where if Coronado was playing with, maybe a guy like Frost or Zary, I could see those guys kind of deferring to him and using that shot. So it's interesting. I'm kind of with you though. Like, I think we need to see a little bit more of it, but just kind of talking like in theory, I kind of like the idea of Coronado with like a Frost and a Zary more so than a Huberdeau and a Kadri.
I wonder too if at the end of the day, just for simplicity's sakes, it is Zary on that top line with those two other guys, just because of the style of game that Zary can play. He can be the guy that goes to the net and cleans up the rebounds from the guys who like to shoot the puck, and that Coronado slots in beside Frost and Farabee, and that becomes a nice second line, complementary line to your top line, and then you let the Backlund line have the third line minutes and allow them to not have as much responsibility. I just wonder if it's simplicity that takes over here at the end of the day. We know how Zary and Kadri work together. We've seen it, and we know what Kadri and Huberdeau can do. We've seen that as well. So it just might be an easy fit at the end of the day. And Coronado might just settle in nicely as a second line player, which isn't a bad thing to have, because Farabee, Frost, Coronado is also a fascinating trio that you could put together for me as well. We've talked a lot about the lineup. We've talked a lot about the kids. We've talked a lot about the future and the bigger picture here. Let's flip our direction here a little bit, Robert. Let's talk about the season here and our favorite moments of the season. We've had a little bit of negativity or honest assessment at the beginning of the podcast here, but let's talk about some things that we've really, really liked from this season here. I'll start while you get your thoughts together as well, because for me, before he got injured, we'll just keep talking about Connor Zary, about how the emergence of Connor has been for this team, how he has embraced the role of being a centerman in the NHL level, has increased his game, his responsibility, and how he continues just to be that pit bull I talked about for this Calgary Flames. For me, Connor Zary has been a huge bright spot for this Flames team. He's become one of my favorite Flames, one of my favorite players in the league to watch. I really enjoy it. It's a big positive for the Flames, and to see this guy blossom into the player we thought he could be when he was drafted, it's awesome to see. It's awesome to watch, and it's been a big progression for the Flames as well, having a guy that steps in here and can play multiple roles in multiple positions for you. So for me, that's one of my favorite moments of the season thus far, is just watching the progression of Connor Zary. What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you, and you could even throw Matt Coronado into the mix if you want to just include, two young forwards. So those are great. In terms of like on ice moments, I would say the opening night against the Vancouver Canucks, that 6-5 overtime victory, was probably the most fun I've had watching Flames hockey this season. That game was spectacular. It had everything. It had, the big JT Miller hit on Kevin Rooney, and then Anthony Mantha going and challenging and fighting JT. Then you had the Mantha Gordie Howe hat trick, the comeback, the spectacular goal by Connor Zary in overtime. That was so much fun. And I do wish we had some more of those games that we could have watched this season. But I would say that's probably been my favorite game of the season. So I'll go with that one so far.
It's hard to believe that game was this season. That's how long this season has felt at times for the Flames. It was an incredible hockey game. I actually love that one. I want to go back to, when was it? I'm just trying to find it here on my phone here. I had it written down. The beginning of January, the Flames went back-to-back losses versus the Hockey Club, versus the Predators. They squeaked out a win versus the Ducks, and they had that game postponed in LA because of the wildfires. Then there was that Kings game that following Saturday, and for some reason that game keeps popping into my brain because it wasn't the prettiest of hockey games. It wasn't the cleanest of hockey games, but for me, that hockey game was just a symbol of the Flames welcoming the Kings in a tough situation. The Flames playing a very strong hockey game against that Kings club. It was a 2-1 result for the Flames. Huberdeau got the goal in the third period to win it. Dustin Wolf was good in net. He stopped 31 shots. But I don't know why that game sticks in my brain, but for me, that was just a nice hockey game. And a moment for both the Flames and especially for the Kings and those players to forget kind of about the outside world and what was going on at that time for them and to play a hockey game. And it was just nice to watch a game after having one postponed and knowing what was going on in California at the time. So it's just a sentimental game, I guess, for me, just watching that hockey game and having two sides go back and forth and playing very well together. I don't know if anyone else in this entire world has that game resonate with them, but for me, that game resonates with me just as a human moment outside of just the game of hockey.
Hey, that's all part of being a hockey fan. I like that one. There's the other on ice moment I have are just the Justin Kirkland shootout winners. I thought those were so much fun, and just like the whole the Costco nickname. Just like what an incredible story. The guy basically, I mean, he was in a serious car accident where, he came close to dying. makes his way back into professional hockey, signs with the Flames, gets called up and never looks back. Like, what a cool story. And then just the shootout winners are just kind of like the cherry on top. I thought that was awesome. But I think for me, when I look back on this season, I'd mentioned that like when we look back on it like 10 years from now, I think it'll be kind of viewed as a bit of a lost year. But I will always look back on the night when the Flames played the Blue Jackets at home, and it was the Gaudreau family was in attendance. That was probably like, I'm just getting like chills just thinking about it right now. That was probably like the most emotional. I don't want to say like beautiful, because I know they're celebrating the lives of Johnny and his brother Matthew who had passed, but like, what an incredible night. Like, what a way to celebrate the life of John and Matthew. And yeah, just to have the family there, the way the family was treated, the pregame ceremony with Sean Monahan and Michael Backlund taking the draw, Rasmus Anderson scoring a goal and pointing at the box where the Gaudreau family was sitting. After the game, they say Johnny Gaudreau is the first star, and Rasmus and Michael Backlund bring Guy Gaudreau onto the ice, and then they have that incredible post-game interview with Ryan Leslie. Like, that is a night I will never forget. That it was so well done by the Flames, so well done by the Blue Jackets, and like I said, like I'm literally getting chills just thinking about that. That was a really sad night, a really difficult night, but at the same time, a really important night for the Gaudreaus, and hopefully it was able to help them heal a bit. But man, that was something else. It's something I will never forget.
I'm glad you're the one that brought that up, because that was also on my list. So to ramp up what you just said makes it talking about it a little bit easier. I was like, I want to talk about this night, but I don't want to get all emotional on the podcast and get all weepy or whatever. Like, because that was such a special night, and you didn't want to use the beautiful, so I'm going to use beautiful because it was beautifully done by the Flames, by the Blue Jackets, and how both teams were respectful in each other's barns, how they tributed the beautiful lives of those two beautiful men who unfortunately were taken from us, and how the job from start to finish, the interviews, the accolades, the pregame ceremony. It meant a lot to the Gaudreaus. You can tell that just by looking at their faces. It meant a lot to the Flames organization that they had that night as well. I think everybody needed a night like that where they were able to do what Johnny loved them do most, and that was play hockey. And his friends were there. They were able to be part of that hockey game. That first star was very emotional. I won't be afraid to admit that there were a lot of tears shed that night as I was watching on my laptop that game. Distinctly remember that night myself, and where I was, what I was doing, and what I was watching, and it absolutely will stand out because of an unfortunate event, but that will ultimately stand out as one of the biggest nights of the season for the Flames, regardless of how this season goes and finishes up here. But a very special night, very special way of tributing a very special person and his brother, and a beautiful family. And I don't know how they're coping still. I really don't understand how they're getting through what they're getting through, but they are. It's such a strong, awesome family. That was an awesome night to be able to tribute to Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew. And if that's not a highlight of your season, then you're made of ice, and I don't know how you're doing it, because it's just beautiful. Well done. It was a good thing. Anything else, Robert, that sticks out to you from this season?
No, I think we covered most of it, but hopefully in the final, 27 games, I hope they're able to make some more memories for the fans, because like I said, it's been fun to watch Dustin Wolf and some of the young players, but in the grand scheme of things, I think it's been a little bit of an underwhelming season for the Calgary Flames in terms of from an entertainment standpoint. So hopefully they can make things interesting here and either just go one way or the other, go one direction or the other. Fight like hell for a playoff spot, or just completely bottom out. Just please, just don't go in the middle. I'm begging this team, do not go in the middle of that.
Yeah, just pick a lane. Just pick a lane. Don't chase it. That's my biggest thing. Don't chase it. Don't chase it just to chase it. If you legitimately come out of the All-Star break, the Four Nations break, and you win 4 games in a row very significantly by scoring 4 goals a game, 3 shutouts from Dustin Wolf, and the path is right there to the playoffs, then I can get understanding why they're going for the playoffs. But if you come out of the gate here, the same old win one, lose one team we've seen for a while now, then you know what you are, and the numbers aren't going to lie to you. And just follow the path. I don't think Flame fans are going to be upset if they take, I don't want to say give up on the year, but if they take the path of we're going to continue this rebuild, continue the process. I don't think fans are going to hate it. There's going to be a section of fans that are always going to want the playoffs. There's always going to be a section of fans that want you to tank to the bottom. But just stick to your plan. Stick to what the numbers are telling you are. And that's the direction the team should go because it's telling you, it's right there out in front of you. So don't chase it. Before we wrap up here, Robert, let the folks know where they can find you, where they can find the latest of your works on flamesnation.ca and what's coming up from you on that site.
Yeah, I think over the Four Nations break here, I'm going to start doing some articles just looking ahead to what contracts could look like for guys like Connor Zary, Matt Coronado, Kevin Bahl, Morgan Frost. There's a lot of really interesting deals that need to be made this summer. So I think I'm just going to do like a bit of a deep dive and, see what those next deals could look like for this team, because I would argue this offseason could shape the future of this team for a long time, depending on what direction they go in terms of contract extensions. Do they go short-term bridge? Do they go long-term 7-8 year deals with these guys? It's going to have a major impact on their cap and a major impact on kind of the roster construction moving forward. So be on the lookout for that.
Mm-hmm. That is Robert Munich at Ring of Fire CGY across social media platforms. Follow him, follow his work, and see what comes out from him over the next couple of weeks. Looking forward to those, Robert. I'm Vintage Johnny 84 across social media as well. And as always, the show is I have doing 2 things at once here. It is Red Mile Rundown across your social media platforms. Don't forget to follow us across wherever you get your podcasts and give us those 5-star ratings and reviews. Enjoy the Four Nations and a little bit of a break from the Flames here. Go Canada, and hopefully we see some good results from that tournament. See you next week.